Welcome to another episode of Preparing for Pregnancy After Loss. This is your host, Natalie Facey, and I'm really excited to be hanging out with you today. I know the world feels crazy right now. I know so much is happening, and the tips that I'm going to be sharing with you are on triggers. Triggers and how to respond to them, how to use them so that they actually accelerate your healing instead of keeping you in a state of feeling frozen or frustrated. I also want to say that I have been hosting weekly sessions on Wednesdays. So the first one started last Wednesday. It was a really beautiful session where people from the pregnancy and loss community, or the infertility community, birth warriors as I call them, they were all able to come together, and I was able to share tips with them on relaxation and self-care, practices to really help them to build resilience and to be able to move through this time that we're going through. So the next one is happening this Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll share the link in the show notes and on my website and on Instagram so that if you're interested, you're able to sign up. These are happening every Wednesday in June, and it's really focused on helping you to be able to move through this time and develop resilience through this time. Cool. So let's move on to the show. Today's episode will be on triggers, how to use triggers to accelerate your healing. Let's first start with what triggers are. So, triggers can be defined as a reminder of a past trauma or a past painful experience that creates some reaction within you. So it could be something that you're observing, something that someone says to you, or some other stimulus, such as a scent or something in your environment that causes a reaction, and sometimes even an emotional reaction, but it could also be a physical reaction within you. Examples of these triggers: so if you've lost a pregnancy, you might be triggered by seeing a pregnant person. Seeing that person might bring back a reminder of your pregnancy loss, or a reminder that you've been having challenges becoming pregnant. So from that reminder, there is an emotional reaction within you. So there might be anger, there might be, a feeling of inadequacy, there might be a feeling of victimhood, like life is unfair or life is unkind to you. In addition to the change in your emotional state, you might also have a physical reaction. So you might have sweaty palms, your heart might be beating really fast, you might notice that your breathing has sped up. It might feel like you're having a panic attack, like you're not able to, you're feeling overwhelmed by the emotions that have come over you. You might also feel frozen, like you might stop breathing for a few seconds and you might feel frozen in your body, unable to move or unable to know what to do. The reaction really does range when you're experiencing a trigger, and the tips that I am going to be sharing today are going to help you to move through that and not simply know how to handle them in the moment, but to actually use triggers to your advantage. One thing that I will share is that I am a fan of hacks. Whenever I realize that there is something that is challenging for me in my healing process, whenever I've come to just like a point where I feel stuck, or a point where I realize that, this has really been an issue for me, then I find ways to work through it. I find these little techniques to work through it to ensure that they actually benefit me instead of impact me negatively. And so I'm going to be sharing a couple of those tips with you today. I also wanted to say shout out to the members of my Birth Warrior Facebook community who shared the triggers that they experience. So one person shared that people not considering her a mom is a trigger. When you become pregnant and you experience a loss, mothering doesn't start when the baby is born. Mothering starts way before the baby is born. The moment you realize you're pregnant, and for some women and birthing people, even before they realize they're pregnant, because they're calling in that baby, they're praying for that baby, they're writing letters for their baby. And so, being a mother doesn't mean that your baby has to be physically here. I believe that being a mother means that you are nurturing your child and nurturing your body and caring for yourself so that you can care for your body. You know, it's loving and nurturing a child, which is mothering. And so, what this person shared is that people don't consider her to be a mother because her baby isn't here. So, she might not hear Happy Mother's Day from some people on Mother's Day, or people might just say things that feel inappropriate and feel like it isn't honoring her experience as a mother. So that's triggering for her. Someone else shared that when parents are ignoring their kids or when they're practicing really unhealthy parenting habits, then that's a trigger for her. So it's like, you know how much you want a child, you know your desire for having a child, and you see other people out into the world that have that blessing of having children, and it's like they don't even recognize how lucky they are, or they don't recognize how beautiful it is that they have that. And so that's triggering for that member. Someone else shared that seeing photos of babies in her doctor's office is also triggering. And so really there are different things that can be triggering, either things that you're observing, things that people say to you, and memories that you might have. I'll share now on how to recognize that you're having a trigger, because sometimes they're sneaky. You know, they might happen in a split second and you're like what is happening right now, because it's a trigger and you don't even realize that it's a trigger that has taken over your body and your emotions. So I am going to help you to identify them right when they come. Okay, the first thing that, or the best way for you to identify them, is to notice a shift in your emotional state, a shift in your attitude, or a shift in your behavior. You know, you're sitting down or you're out for a walk, just minding your own business. Something happens and there is just a total change in your mood, and you don't even know what happened, right? Because they kind of sneak up on you sometimes. So when you notice just a total change in your mood, pause and ask yourself, what just happened? What just happened? When you pause and invite this awareness to come in, then you can go back to the seconds and the milliseconds and figure out what happened. So it could be that, you know, if you're triggered by pregnant people, it could be that you were walking in the park and you saw this pregnant woman who looked like she was thriving in her pregnancy, like pregnant and beautiful and happy, and some reminder or some thought might have come up for you which caused you to feel negative emotions, or which caused you to go into this state of, you know, this isn't happening for me. I want this to be happening for me, and I'm really annoyed that it's happening for other people. And so it's really noticing what's happening. What was the trigger? What was the thing that prompted that reaction within you? What were you observing? What memory came back for you? What thought came back for you, which triggered or prompted that reaction within you? And once you are able to identify, oh, I'm actually having a trigger right now, there's actually something that is causing this emotional reaction within me, or causing this physical reaction in me, then you have more control over the situation. You know, it isn't that something has just taken you over against your will. Once you have that awareness, then you're able to take back your control. So awareness, and just like track back what just happened. Most times the responses that you might be having or that people in general have when they experience a trigger is the fight, flight, or freeze response. And I shared about unresolved trauma and pain and how if those things aren't resolved, we're still carrying them in our system in the last episode, so episode number 3. So if you haven't listened to that episode yet, definitely an important one to listen to because I talk about the responses that we're having in our bodies as a result of trauma that isn't resolved or as a result of going through a painful experience that isn't resolved. So fight, flight, or freeze, the responses typically fall into one of those areas. Fight, it could be a physical fight, but hopefully you don't get into any physical fight when someone triggers you. Hopefully you don't. The other thing that might happen under the fight category is that you might become combative or argumentative because you're triggered. And that's just the response that sort of automatically comes out of you if that's a behavior that you practice a lot. So the thing that we practice most often, that's the thing that is going to be most accessible to us because our brain kind of goes back to those same tracks that we travel often. The road most traveled, the brain goes back on those tracks because it's easy, right? Within the flight category, which is when you try to get the hell out of that situation. So someone might say something to you, or you might be at a family gathering and someone says something inappropriate to you, something that causes you to feel emotional. You might just like walk away from that conversation because your emotional response is flight, is to get the hell away. So another response that you might have is to be frozen. So you might find yourself frozen in the moment. Let's say that, it's the same person who said something inappropriate or asked some weird question that made you really uncomfortable. So you might find yourself being frozen, unable to respond in that situation. So that's another response that you might have to triggers. I am now going to go into how to use triggers to actually accelerate your healing, how to use them as a benefit so that you're not going into the trauma response or the defense responses of fight, flight, and freeze, right? As I mentioned before, I love finding hacks for healing. The core belief that I have is that everything that comes into our lives, every negative experience, it also has the potential for massive healing, right? And so if we're able to learn the lessons, if we're able to mine the blessings from that experience, then we realize that there's a way that it actually works in our favor. You don't have to be broken by your experiences. You can actually use those same experiences to funnel the life that you want. Use those same experiences as energy to create the life that you want to be experiencing, right? So triggers can be a gift, and I'll show you exactly how to use them as gifts. And this is the gift in triggers. They help you to identify where it still hurts. They help you to identify where the healing still needs to be done. And once you're in that place where you know what still needs to be healed and you take the time to work on those things, then your healing gives you more freedom. Your healing creates more balance in your life. There's more balance in your body. There's more balance in your emotional state. And how you show up is from that place of balance. And the other thing that is so important, which is what I have been stressing for the past couple of weeks as we have been in this state of rupture and transformation, is that when we deal with our own stuff, when we deal with our own pain and trauma, then we don't need to pass that on to our kids. I know that a number of you might be able to think of ways in which that ways in which you were parented that you wish were different, or experiences that you went through as children that were negative experiences, and they've really served as blockages in your life. They've really served as challenges in your life, and you have had to go to either therapy or counseling or coaching, but really work through those things because of your experiences as children. The reason why our experiences as children might have felt difficult or out of balance is because our parents were out of balance. And so, as much as they love us and as much as they want to give the best for us, their best might not even have been as good as we wanted it to be. You know, they were giving us their best, but even the best had so much imbalance, perhaps because of how they were parented, perhaps because of the world that they were growing up in, but most definitely because they weren't able to work through their own challenges and pain and trauma enough so that they were coming from a space of wholeness, so that they were coming from a space of being balanced and were able to give to us from that full, whole, complete, balanced state. And so now it's our responsibility, as we're looking to bring these little ones into the world. Can we deal with our own stuff enough so that we're not passing on our imbalance to them? And even the actions or the habits and the behavior as parents aside, we're carrying trauma in our genes, you know? And when we're able to deal with that within our bodies, when we're able to experience that healing on a cellular, energetical, emotional level, then what we pass on when we're carrying these little ones within our bodies, within our wombs, what we're passing on is that light and that goodness and that love, right? And so that's why I stress healing now. That's why I have been trained in somatic therapy, because somatic therapy takes in the body and what's happening within the body. It's not just talking about your experience and trying to, go back to the past and resolve things. It is going to the body, what's happening in the body right now as we're talking about this, and healing what is happening in the body, healing what's being activated in the body. All right. I went on a tangent. So let's go back. Let's go back on course. All right. So again, I'm going to take you into how you can transform these triggers, make them work for you, right? I'll start with sharing one of my experiences of triggers, or a couple of them actually. When I just experienced my first loss, I remember being in bed a lot. I remember the bedroom just being so dark. I didn't want to see any light. I was just under the covers for several days. I don't remember what the timing was, or how many days or weeks are passing. But I remember the first time my husband took me outside, because he knew that I needed to be outside. I needed to get fresh air in order to feel better. And so he was gently guiding me down the stairs in our apartment building. And this was the first time that I was walking down the stairs not being pregnant. And the memory came back to me of when I was pregnant, and I began bawling my eyes out, because this memory that I lost the baby. And so that was really, really painful. And I remember that because it was like, oh, wow, I'm going down these stairs, and I used to have to be so careful. I used to have to hold on because I wanted to make sure that I was protecting myself and the baby. And now I'm walking down with no baby. And that was pretty painful. When when I went out into the streets and saw pregnant people, I was also annoyed. I'm going to admit it. I would say things in my mind like, is it pregnancy season? Like, why the hell are there so many pregnant people out on the streets and why don't they stay home? Because they looked like they were thriving in their pregnancy. Obviously, they were still pregnant and I wasn't, and so I was super annoyed to even see them. When I did my 6 week checkup, they give you this form. I don't remember what the form is called, but just like a follow up form. And I remember one of the questions being, do you have depressive feelings? And I was like, wow. Of course, I have depressive feelings. I just lost a baby. Tell me, what do you think? And I didn't even fill out the damn form. I was like, I'm not having it. I was actually really annoyed because that was like in the hospital or in the OBGYN's office. And I felt as though they should have been a bit more sensitive. But there is so little control that we have within our external environment, right? There is so little control that we have. We cannot ask all the pregnant people to stay home. We I didn't even think of telling my OBGYN ahead of time, don't give me that form because there's something on it that's going to trigger me. How would I even think about it when I didn't even know that I would receive that form, right? So we can't control our external environment, but we can control how we respond to it. We can control, what our thoughts are. The key thing to keep in mind when it comes to triggers is that you're having a thought about the memory. So when the memory comes back to you, oh, lost my pregnancy, or, lost my baby, or haven't been able to become pregnant, you are having a thought about that memory. You are deciding in your mind what that memory means to you. And so if you're able to control, firstly, if you're able to observe that thought, notice the thought that you're having, then you're able to change it. Then you're able to control it to something that serves you, to something that is better and more uplifting for you. And it takes practice. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that this is something that's easy, but each time that the memory comes back to you, you get to transform it. It's almost like, using clay or Play-Doh. Each time this memory comes back, you get to change it to something better, something more beautiful, something easier for you to digest, something that is more loving. So I'll give an example of a particular trigger that I have and how I transformed it. So I remember walking in Penn Station in New York City, and this is after my pregnancy loss. And I saw a woman in Penn Station. We were passing each other on the stairs, and this was a pregnant woman. And I remember thinking, why are so many people having easy and healthy pregnancies, but I'm not, right? I was sort of annoyed. The thought that came to me after that was that I don't actually know that this woman's pregnancy journey has been an easy one. She might have had miscarriages. She might have had to go through IVF for her current pregnancy. She might be wearing a cerclage right now to help her to prolong her current pregnancy. So I really don't know what's going on in this woman's life. I'm really just seeing, the result for her to date. I don't know what her history and what her journey has been. And I really credit my husband for helping me with processing my own loss so that it was easy for that thought to come to me. When I've had my moments of complaining that life is unfair and all of these things have happened in my life and, I shouldn't have had a miscarriage, his response is usually, babe, people go through all sorts of things. There are people who have had multiple losses. There are people who are having challenges becoming pregnant. Like, people go through all sorts of things. we don't have control over what happens, or we have little control. We can just hope for the best and do the best with whatever comes. Yes, he's so sweet for saying that. And I so appreciate him for just offering those words to me, because it brought a broader perspective in my moments of, life is harsh, life is so painful, poor me, things are so bad. And of course, and I'm not even going to like criticize myself for saying all of those things, because my complaining was a part of my processing, but he helped me to move to a greater level of love and move to a greater level of self compassion and a greater understanding for other people's experiences in that moment. And so, as I saw other pregnant people, I was no longer complaining about how difficult my pregnancy journey was. I was actually acknowledging that people are going through all sorts of things, that the pregnancy journey is uncertain. And because the pregnancy journey is uncertain, the next thing that I was able to do was that whenever I saw a pregnant woman, I would actually bless that person. Whenever I saw someone pregnant, I would actually bless them. I would whisper affirmations and prayers for them and hope that this is actually making me emotional, and hope that their baby has a safe journey to the earth plane, hope that their baby makes it into the mother's arms, because it's difficult for some people, you never know. And so I moved from a state of I'm so annoyed at pregnant people. Why are there why are there so many pregnant people on the streets, to the state of blessing them, blessing their pregnancy journey and hoping that it is a smooth and easy and beautiful one for them, right? So that's the transformation, that's the healing that is possible when you work with triggers. One thing that I will point out is that in that experience of like looking at these pregnant people, it was easier for me to work with it. And I'll go back to the example of molding the clay or molding the Play Doh. It was easier for me to work with this idea when I considered the woman or considered the birthing person as being a reflection of me. This person also might have had a difficult pregnancy. This person might have experienced infertility. So if I thought of someone who had no challenges in their pregnancy at all, that thought might have been a bit more difficult for me. So I started where it was easier for me. And you'll know where it's easier for you. You'll know. After focusing just on women or just on birthing people who might be having a challenge in pregnancy, I then expanded that to all women and all birthing people. So whenever I saw someone, I just sent them love. I just affirmed goodness and blessings over their life. So let me break down what I did. The first thing that I did was notice the thought that I was having. So stimulus or trigger was pregnant person. The thought that came after that was, other people are having good pregnancy experiences and my experience was not a positive one. So I noticed the thought that I was having. The next step from there is I offered a new one. Like, oh, I don't know that this person's experience has actually been an easy one. This person might have also had challenges. And by offering a new one, there was more compassion. There was more understanding, both for that person and for myself. And this trigger, whenever that stimulus or that trigger of pregnant people came, because I had already elevated it to this new thought, to this new idea, whenever I saw a pregnant person, that's the thought or the idea that came first. Oh, maybe their pregnancy is also difficult. Oh, I don't know what their pregnancy has been like. And each time the subject came back, each time I saw another pregnant person, then I could elevate it. I could work with it in a different way. I could make it even a more positive thought by then, blessing everyone who was pregnant, because, shit happens during pregnancy. And if we have a world where there are no pregnancy challenges, and that's a happier world for everyone. So hopefully taking you through that example and breaking down the tips was helpful for you. In this week's session, in this week's Wednesday session, I call it the Rising Higher session. So in this week's session, we can actually go through an exercise of working with triggers. If you join, you can share what your triggers are. What are the things that have been coming up that have been challenging for you, painful for you, that are leading to an emotional or physical reaction that's hard for you to work through, and we'll come up with ways to work through those triggers and elevate them. Some tips that will make this technique easier. It's tremendously beneficial when you process the experience. So working with a coach or a therapist, my coaching program focuses on healing after loss, either if you're pregnant or looking to become pregnant, helping you to connect with your baby, helping you to connect with your body, and building a tribe of support around you, and using the tribe that you already have around you, including your doctor, capitalizing on their support so that you're having the kind of pregnancy that you want to be having. So work with a coach or a therapist. Journaling helps to process. So just writing out, and this could be the beginning of the day or the end of the day, or whenever something occurs to you, whenever something comes up for you, writing that down so that you're able to basically release all the stuff that your mind has to hold. And if your mind is holding it, it means that it's also being held in your body. So being able to release all of those things, and when you see it on paper, you're able to come up with a new story. You're able to redefine what your experiences have been. Talking to a friend is also beneficial. It needs to be a friend who is going to be able to create space for you. It needs to be someone who isn't uncomfortable with your pain, isn't trying to force you into healing or force you into feeling better, but can sit with you with whatever experience that you're having. Anything that you're having, they're able to create space for you. It's also helpful to expose yourself to other people's stories, So when my husband reminded me that, listen, people are having all kinds of experiences. Like it's messed up that we had that, but know that it's a part of life. So we just have to do the best that we can with the experiences that we've had. And so other ways to expose yourself to other people's experiences is on Facebook or social media. Follow different channels with people who've experienced loss or infertility, so that you don't feel so alone, and so that you can take inspiration from their pregnancy journey. One of the reasons why I created the private Facebook group is that I wanted people to feel supported. I wanted people to be cocooned from the world of criticism or judgment, where they could be with other birth warriors, others who were having similar experiences, and everyone can just be real with each other and also support each other as they're going through their journey of pregnancy after loss or infertility. I'll include the link to check that out in the show notes, and definitely excited to have you join us. Practicing self-love and self-compassion. Oh my gosh, this is such an important one. And the reason for that is whenever you have a thought that is judgmental or critical, you practicing self-love and self-compassion, then you give yourself grace, Like when I was walking in those streets and being like, why are there so many pregnant people here and why don't they go home? I didn't feel bad about saying that, because I knew that in my state of just feeling terrible about myself and terrible about the world, like that's the thought that came to me. And so, in practicing self compassion, in practicing self love, I knew that those words weren't from a state of hatred, any bad place. It was just where I was emotionally. And so that's what came out of me. I will say that there are instances in which triggers can be a lot more difficult to work with. If your triggers are causing panic attacks, if you're seeing more severe signs of PTSD, like not being able to function, if it feels like you're reliving the experience and the environment that you're in has just transformed into the traumatic experience from the past, then you really need to be working with someone through that. You shouldn't be going through that alone. You really need to be working with either a therapist or a coach, a psychologist. You really need to be working with someone with that. And so the technique that I shared before of like recognizing the thoughts, pausing in the moment, recognizing the thought and changing it to a new one, that won't work in this case, or it likely will not work in this case, because you don't even feel as though you have control of the thought. You don't even feel as though you have control over your surroundings. If you are having a panic attack, though, this is how you can work through it. You first need to ground yourself. And by grounding yourself, you're really using your body to connect with something physical in your environment. If you're sitting, you might want to touch the chair or wherever you're sitting, touch a surface with your hands. You might want to feel the ground under your feet, whether you're sitting or standing. So this just reminds you that you're here in this moment, right? Whatever memory is coming back to you just reminds you of where you are. And immediately there's a greater sense of safety that comes from remembering that you are here right now in this moment. The other thing that you can do after grounding yourself is either closing your eyes or looking around. And I'll tell you why these are different. If you're having an internal stimulus, if there's a thought that's coming to you that is causing you to have a panic attack, look around your surroundings so that you remember where you are. You're not where that thought is happening, which is in the past. You're right here in the present, and you're seeing what's happening in your surroundings and where you are. Okay. If the stimulus, on the other hand, is external, if it's actually something in your surroundings that is triggering you, then it's actually beneficial to close your eyes. So when you close your eyes, you're limiting that stimulus and you're allowing yourself to find a calm space again. And then the next thing to do is start to slow your breathing. So you found a calm state and you can go back to your happy place, whether it's on a beach, whether it's out in nature, on the grass, in a field. Find a place that gives you comfort, and then you begin to soften and slow your breathing. All right, so that helps with panic attacks. And then the next thing to do is get help. So if you're alone, you might call a family member or someone who is like a support line for you. And if you find that this is something that has been reoccurring, like you've been having recurring panic attacks, then you need to get trained help. So either work with a coach or a therapist or a psychologist, but someone who is able to help you with the processing of the past painful experience so that it isn't overtaking your present moment. Okay? All right, so that's the exception. But what I shared before in terms of becoming aware of the thought that you're having offering a new thought, and each time that memory or that trigger comes back, you continue to elevate it, you continue to work with it, you continue to shift it. That will work perfectly for any trigger that doesn't completely take you over. Okay? All right, so I hope this episode was helpful. Again, triggers can be a gift. I think they are, this opportunity to go back into the past and add bits of love and compassion to those experiences so that as you're here in the present and as you're moving into the future, they're healed, they're less difficult to deal with, and they're less difficult to remember. And these memories can move from a state of feeling completely disempowered. They can move from a state of feeling as though, you've been gutted out, or you've lost something that was so precious to you, to this state of empowerment, to this state of, oh, I had that really challenging experience. I know that other people have challenging experiences, and there are ways to move through it. And look how I've been moving through it. I've been doing so much work. I've been healing day by day. I've been doing my work to heal. And I think what's also cool with triggers in terms of healing is that you kind of just get bits of it at a time, So that the entire experience of pregnancy loss or the entire experience of infertility, whether that experience happened a month ago or several years ago, and regardless of how long it lasted, you don't relive the entire experience through a trigger. You just get a little bit of it each time, like a little piece of digestible, I'm going to call it pain, a little digestible, painful memory each time. And even in that, I think it's a gift, because it's almost like life is saying, hey, this thing still really hurts. This thing is something that you still need to work through and heal. And I'm just giving you a little bit today or a little bit this week so that you can work through it. And once you've worked through that, I'm going to give you something else. And so healing is necessary if we want to have a balanced, whole, full, rich, abundant life. Like, healing is necessary, but we get to deal with just a little bit at a time, which makes it so much easier. So I hope that today's episode on using triggers to accelerate your healing was helpful. Healing is advocacy. So in the midst of everything that's happening right now, your healing is a form of advocacy. Because with your healing, you get to show up as the best version of yourself. You get to be inspired as to what action you should take, how you can help to elevate your community or your family. You get to take action from a place of strength versus from the wounded version of yourself, because you're working through those wounds and you're doing your healing. And you get to give your children the best chance at life because you do your own healing work first. You don't pass on your trauma and your stuff to them. You do your healing work so that they get to show up and they get to live their purpose without having to undo the things that they experienced as children, which is so important. Here are ways to stay in touch, ways to continue to advocate for yourself or to advocate for other women. Share this episode with someone who you think needs to know it. I think once a woman or birthing person goes through loss or infertility, you tend to learn of other people who've gone through the same experience. Like other people start to say, oh yeah, me too. Oh yeah, that also happened to me. So share this episode with someone who is in your circle, someone who is in your tribe who might benefit from it. Second, follow me on Instagram at The Birth Warriors, all one word. Birth Warriors with an S at the end. This is my dedicated channel for birth work and for healing after loss, for focusing on your pregnancy after loss or infertility. And join the Facebook community. It's called the Birth Warrior Community. You'll be surrounded by so much love and so much support, and you'll be able to connect with others who are on a similar journey of pregnancy after loss or infertility. All right. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today. This has been a pleasure and an honor. I am looking forward to connecting with you on social media, or feel free to send me an email, hello@nataliefacey.com. Hopefully you're also able to join the Wednesday Rising Higher sessions at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find the link to that within my Instagram bio. And you can also find the link to that in the Facebook group for you to sign up. It's a private Zoom session, so people who attend have to RSVP. But hopefully you're able to join. This session will likely do a relaxation self-care exercise so that you have tips to keep yourself balanced as we move through this time of ours. And we'll work through triggers if you'd like to share some of the triggers you've been having and how we can heal and elevate them. Thank you for joining me again today, and look out for the next episode in 2 weeks. Thank you. Bye.